Hello and welcome to Nexdigm Supply Chain Podcast Series. I'm Kartik Nagarajan, and through this series, we provide insights on managing the supply chain in the healthcare industry by leveraging digital transformation technology. Our previous episode covered the role of purchasing in the supply chain. Just to reiterate the key learning that we draw from our last episode, we talked about two major things. The first one is one needs to look beyond cost and quickly adapt to the new situation. The second one was risk management and resilience have become a driving force in taking a lot of decisions. With that, this episode, we are trying to cover supply chain at an organization as big as Terumo, and innovation in the post-COVID world continues to be the key agenda of Terumo. We are very fortunate to be engaging with Probir Das, Regional CEO and Chairman, APAC Terumo Asia Holdings, to discuss digitization supply chain. As a board member of APAC Med, founding board member of MTI, and a former member of leadership at FICCI and Nat Health, Probir carries overall 3 decades of commercial experience. Out of those, 20 years focused on mission-critical medtech leadership across Asia, and 10 years of teaching experience with BD University and Terumo India Leadership Council that involves leadership development, coaching, mentoring, performance management, and selecting the best. I would welcome Probir. Probir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me join you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Probir. So we'll just ask you a series of questions, Probir. Get your thoughts across to our audience and try to learn from experience. Probir, we'll start with the first one, which is post-pandemic, companies have accelerated digital adoption in the supply chain, is what we hear. What areas does Terumo prioritize for digital space in the supply chain domain?
Pandemic has no doubt accentuated the need for a very dynamic and agile supply chain. At Terumo, we have had to really completely and very quickly pivot our entire portfolio to cater to alternate realities of demand. To aid this, we have integrated demand planning with and strengthening this advancement of S&OP through visual dashboarding, down to sales rep level through Power BI tools, etc. Our discipline of engagement has no doubt helped, but quite frankly, digitizing or at least visualizing it and making it available on time at need made this possible. Also, we have proved how far simple digital solutions can stretch. Oftentimes you're talking about very complex solutions, but we've really gotten to very, very simple digital solutions. But it is working for us.
Okay. And when we look upon the aspects, let's say in terms of the demand planning, right? The artificial intelligence in the space of demand planning, Probir, are we ready for that step change, especially in emerging economies where we've heard the demand patterns are very challenging to predict? What's your take on that?
Frankly, we are yet to harness the power of AI, so to say. And I don't know many who are already at least in our industry. But that said, it is certainly the direction. What we are talking about now, or what we are thinking now, is that we shall integrate some machine learning, some AI in our demand mapping and forecasting. But given the complexity and the dynamic nature of our portfolio, it may still take some time for us.
And from that perspective, what are the steps do you think we should take, in that direction? Be it digitization, like you clearly mentioned, in terms of visibility, providing the dashboard, or also in terms of demand planning. What are the steps that we need to take as an industry or as an organization to be ready for that?
From an AI standpoint?
AI and even digital adoption, right? If that was, I'm just trying to combine the first two themes for you.
So the steps, you see, I'll give you my perspective, right? If you look at, we need to be solving for something.
Sure.
We need to be solving for a risk, or we need to be solving for a gap, or we need to be solving to create value, right? So in that context, and I'm migrating to risk quickly because in the pandemic environment, you see a lot of risk in supply chain. Everybody sees that. Every industry is seeing that. Now, I'll give you our example, right? there is this huge challenge of sudden drops in our traditionally high selling SKUs due to abrupt changes in procedure numbers or patient availability. Simultaneously, the demand of erstwhile low selling SKUs have suddenly surged. Our business models involve many things, but they also involve consignments of relatively low expiry horizon, high COG products. Therefore, we had to mitigate this at a big hospital level from a expiry risk standpoint. Yeah? The second thing that we had to solve for is that shipment costs have suddenly gone up 4-5x. Freight availability is at an all-time high uncertainty. You can see these disruptions are multifarious, and they often have a combination effect. It is not, one combined with the other suddenly has a multiplier effect. So what have we done? We have adopted a war room demand supply model, right? So we have very clearly, this would have not been possible without the power of everybody looking at the same data at the same time. So that is where our, everybody has SAP, but we have translated the SAP data to very meaningful business useful, sales rep useful, sales manager useful, demand planner useful dashboards. At the very onset of COVID, our global CEO had unambiguously asked the entire organization to protect its supply chain. That was one of our call to action in crisis management. We used this call to action as our go-to principle. We used it to the fullest. Firstly, we focused on inventory, demand, backorder data visualization to put everybody on the same page in spite of being a very diverse portfolio with regard to geographies and products. Secondly, we very aggressively socialized these dashboards during management meetings. So fast track conversion of this abrupt demand was made into an agile manufacturing scale-up. In doing all of these, as they say, we kind of built the plane as you flew it. We built our digital capabilities and processes as we solved these challenges. We did not have the time to really plan and think and build it over a long period of time. But we have kind of done and managed this huge portfolio shift and demand surge.
Got it. And one of the things that I also, recall you just briefly touching about the risk part, right? Risk elements. So we all know that risks are increasing in the supply chain domain, and with disruptions happening on the supply and the demand side, Probir, how do you think digitization can address some of those risks and yet build resilience in the company?
I did tell you that, we did it through creating very simple 3 things. We used the CEO's call to action for protecting supply chain. That was a fundamental COVID crisis management strategic pillar. So everybody was doing all across the company. We were protecting our associates, we were protecting our supply chains and doing a few other things, but there was a lot of commonality. All of us were looking at doing the same 3 or 4 things. Number 2, I talked about the power of visualization.
Got it.
Complex SAP models, you're not looking at 30-page reports anymore. You're looking at a single screen dashboard and everybody knows where the problem is. What is yellow, what is red, what is green. So we did that. And then I talked about this whole war room principle, right? Later I can explain how we have enacted the war room, but we have really got into a war room and gotten everybody involved, the global business units, the global plants, the global demand planners, the global sourcing leaders, sometimes even our supply vendors. We have gotten on the same table and we have talked about this huge surge of requirement. We have had to go and sell things which we have never sold in Asia Pacific or never sold much in Asia Pacific. like things like, plasma therapy equipment, or we have sold things like ECMO. We have sold things, multiple folds of syringe pumps, infusion pumps. But the whole idea was that, falling back on the mission, the corporate mission of, contributing to society through healthcare. Never has healthcare been a global challenge as big. Yeah. So it's getting people on the same table with the same input output. That really manages risk.
Got it. And in terms of, let's say, the visibility part, like you correctly mentioned, right? There have been dashboarding, there have been throughputs, and even from a call to action, right? Overall, how the global CEO and at APAC level you're driving. I just had a question that, when I look at overall healthcare industry, right, especially supply chain, we still struggle with the visibility of actual consumption by customers, right? So the question for you would be, how important is the visibility part for you, and how is Terumo addressing this, right? Is it a change management issue more, that you have to actually get the data information from the end customers, more than a technology issue? What would you attribute? What are your takes on that?
Quite frankly, I personally think it is more of a change management issue.
Okay.
Because unlike consumer product companies, medtech companies have traditionally focused on such levers as feature pushing or key opinion leader management or sales channel. But it is changing, albeit gradually, but it is changing. I'll give you again, I'm not representing the entire industry. I can talk about what we are doing. Personally, every single month, for every single business unit, for every single country under my remit, I personally review delta between primary and in-market sales. It requires a lot of discipline. It requires a lot of getting into microscopic details, but I do it personally. Now, with better account level visualization, with SFDC, Salesforce.com or other tools, we are also building. Actually, we are now also building a distributor portal for integrated demand planning. And I believe that these will make ours a lot more capable in the next 18 to 24 months. Once that data is accessible, what we will do is we will hold front-facing organization accountable for in-market sales, channel managers accountable for primary sales, and we will incentivize this change management very aggressively.
Got it. And which means you're still attributing more from a change, right, versus technology, because what we've been, made aware most of the time is there are a lot of technological solutions that people are trying to deliver to the market. But you're saying fundamentally it is more of a change management, right? So that's the conclusion we're drawing.
Yes. So, we could, quite frankly speaking, this entire supply chain dashboard of what is available, when it is available, etc., or what is the OTIF score, or tracking it down to an account level, all that is technology driven, no doubt, or tracking consignments through a handheld barcode reader or mobile phone. All that is technology driven, but that technology exists.
True.
It's nothing that we have to innovate for. It's already existing. Tools also exist. Where the change comes is that whole orientation of what am I responsible for? Am I responsible for in-market consumption, or am I responsible for billing at the end of the month? Yeah. So that's the change management that one is driving at this point in time.
Got it. And if you could maybe also touch upon the aspects of supplier management, right? The supplier management and collaboration. From your perspective, Probir, is there a progress with digital investments, or is it still a pain area, right? When we talk about supplier management, the hard yards, right, in terms of the communication, in terms of the performance management and collaboration back and forth, do you believe that in terms of digitization investment, you've seen a lot of progress, or is it still a tough sell, at a decision-making level, especially on making end investment to the supplier end? What's your take on that?
It's a very complex situation for us, especially because we are not a single product or a single therapy area company. Yeah. So Terumo has a very diverse product portfolio. It's cardiovascular, hospital supplies, blood and cell technology that sources from over 30 manufacturing locations across both equipment and disposables. So it's as complex a supply chain as you can imagine in healthcare. We work through a network of legacy and acquired company supplier network. So it's a very, very complex supply chain. Of course, there are challenges, but we are a 100-year-old company that has deep knowledge of and credibility within this supply network, right? We are making definite progress with digitization. There are large projects and investments ongoing within the company to scale these up at a supplier integration standpoint. But at our scale, it will never get done in a day. It will never get done, period. It's a shifting goalpost, and we will have to continuously score every day. I doubt there would be a day when we'd say, well, I've integrated all my suppliers on a certain digital portal and I'm done with it. It's shifting every day. By that time, God knows how many new businesses.
No, understood. And the other aspects, right, in terms of the critical and the non-critical aspects, wherein, people, especially on the cost aspect, tend to lean towards outsourcing their back-end operations. Is it also part of the overall strategy or also a digital strategy, as work from home has proved that it is possible to manage operations remotely, right? So, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, 2 years maybe, that working from home has been made a reality. Obviously, there are challenges we all know, but we're still moving on with work from home, right? Majority of the organization. So from that perspective, do you see now, with that happening more, outsourcing back-end operation would be a reality? What's your take on that?
So in my opinion, outsourcing back-end operation is a business model. It's not necessarily a digital strategy. It's a business model strategy.
Sure.
It's an efficiency play, right? But it is also a trade-off of what do you gain and what do you lose. So it's not a simple math.
Sure.
Of course, without digitization or some level of digitization, remote models will not even work. But that's fundamental. At Terumo Asia Pacific, we have a very hybrid model which combines owned supply chain with an outsourced 3PL, 4PL network, and even some remote locationing. On remote locationing, we are making very aggressive, rapid progress. For some quick examples, our consignment operations in Australia has for some times been supported remotely from India. It's a complex operation. Recently, we moved some of our invoicing tasks from our Singapore regional office to India. We are also starting to support some of our US supply chain work from India. Now, we are doing this to test waters. We are acquiring that requisite muscle. We have not yet made the decision of whether it would be insourced remote or outsourced whatever. That decision has to be made, but we are building those requisite muscles and insights. Eventually, global supply chain, business service centers are a part of our envisioned future. There is no doubt. GBS is a part of our envisioned future. But through what model, whether it would be our own or it would be outsourced, whether it would be a combination of in-market and remote location, that map is getting drawn as we speak.
No, makes sense. And the reason why I kind of touched upon the outsourcing part, also in the overall, whenever it comes to a cost-driven strategy, outsourcing always leads the discussion, right? So, and maybe we're also trying to see if there is, like you correctly mentioned, that it could be a hybrid model, that would suit Terumo and maybe a lot of other organizations as well. So,
in fact, the thing that I wanted to underscore here is that I don't believe that these should entirely be just cost-driven. I mean, you can take cost out of the system, but beyond a certain point, the discussion migrates to how much value are we building. Not cost, but primary driver, because anybody who has migrated to a GBS purely on the merit of cost has really lost competition. So we are in a life-saving business, and there has to be a certain quality and there has to be a certain agility, and there has to be a certain value that we take to market. Once that value is protected, should we think about what is outsourced, what is insourced? But predominantly, it would be value-driven and not just purely cost-driven.
No, and it's great because you touched upon a very critical aspect, because there's always a popular perception that outsourcing is only related to cost. But maybe that could be a key driver while protecting the customer satisfaction, while protecting agility, right? Or the speed with which you execute. I think in times to come, maybe outsourcing could also lead or pave the way for some more innovation on some of these, right, as well, beyond cost. So understood. And this is very critical, especially coming from you, Probir, because there are many organizations even today, they're grappling with the decision of how to make outsourcing work, right? So it's important to understand your perspective on that.
We are outsourcing. We should be outsourcing for not just cost. It should be cost and skill that you're outsourcing for.
Sure, absolutely. And and obviously, right, then the location planning of the outsourcing area would also be based on the availability of skill sets, and how they can lead some of the change, if not follow. So, I think these are critical aspects.
Geopolitical shift, many elements.
Sure. So, Probir, first of all, I'd like to thank you again for providing your time, insights, and clarity of what has changed in the market, what one should do to be ready for the future. I'm sure our listeners will find this discussions very insightful too. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. And if you have any questions on this subject or have any suggestions for future topics, please do write to us at thinknext@nexdigm.com. And thank you, Probir, once again. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lovely conversation. Thanks, Kartik.
Thank you.